of that process because, of course, one of the first financial things a newly bereaved person has to deal with is how they pay for the funeral. Now, that might be covered by the estate, but sometimes it can be a real challenge. Let's speak to John Halliday, the chair of Caledonia Funeral Aid, who's speaking to us from Glasgow. John, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Felicity.
How much is a typical funeral, and what's the lowest price you can reasonably manage at?
Well, we've got good evidence that an average funeral is around £4,000. That's double what it was 10 years ago. But if you think about that, £4,000, I bet you're imagining that's kind of all the costs and maybe a comprehensive funeral, but
maybe
that's
horses with plumes.
No, exactly. It's a basic funeral. It doesn't even have flowers. There's no sense that includes the food at a wake, for instance. So we're talking about just covering the bare minimum costs. It's gone up enormously. And in fact, the bit I always choose to draw people's attention to is the fact that not only do you need to find that money, you normally need to find half that money, maybe £2,500 in cash straight away to pay before you can get your funeral date sorted. So you need it right then. So of course people are falling back on trying to raise money from friends and family. People are putting on credit cards where they no real plans for how they could pay it back. And even 1 in 7 people who fall into these financial difficulties, we know that they're selling possessions that they didn't want to sell, maybe their car, maybe they're selling a TV, things like that, just to get through this stage. People are living a worse life just because they're trying to meet these financial obligations.
And I suppose this is a very emotionally charged purchase, isn't it? People must feel very strongly they want to give their loved one a big send-off.
It is. I mean, it's got to be the hardest time of someone's life. If you've lost your partner, realistically, you can't put yourself in someone's shoes if you haven't gone through that. It's enormous. And I completely agree with what was just said. The administration of it is huge. People are often caught off guard by the expenses, but having had that discussion in advance, hopefully you should know what your partner's wishes are now. If you don't think they know yours, it's important you share that. It's important you do that with everyone in your family. But that's because you're going to need to make decisions. Almost everyone is having to make a decision about cutting some aspects of a funeral back, whether that's just that they don't hire a limo, say, or something like that. For other people, it's that they're no longer putting a memorial up. They're having to save that money because so many people are facing financial pressure. That's a major choice in terms of how you're going to experience grief and bereavement in the long term. And I think people need to go open-eyed into that, so have the conversation today.
So that's cutting back, but a phrase you sometimes hear is funeral poverty. What if you simply can't afford it?
Well, we are often getting called by people. We cover Scotland. We're a charitable project fighting against funeral poverty across Scotland. We often get called by people who are £7,000 in debt, and it's really too late to help them, to be honest. Ideally, we get called by people who are at the point where they say, well, what are my options? How could I have something that's cheaper? We had someone recently who called who was being offered £4,500 funeral. We phoned a reputable funeral director. We negotiated. Never be afraid to haggle. We negotiated. We said, look at their circumstances. Got it for £2,250. Only a small deposit up front and a 6-month payment plan. We then managed to get a free celebrant for them. There's things we can do that try to bring the costs down. Our service is very limited in what we can do. We try to encourage people to self-help, and we've created a new website for people to do that. And we try to concentrate on the people who are in the deepest poverty at the moment, because we have no funding from UK government, Scottish government, local authorities, just based on people's goodwill, some extremely generous volunteers, some extremely overworked staff, and generous donors to just hold it together as best we can. So we do try to concentrate on those who are in the deepest poverty, but for those we can do something.
And I suppose, you work across Scotland, I know, but there'll be organisations like yours across the rest of the UK that might be able to provide that help and support and advice.
Yeah, there's excellent advice available through many organisations, including the Citizens Advice across the UK. Cruise Bereavement do an excellent job around bereavement counselling, but also around support in this area. But I do want to highlight that just by complete coincidence today we've launched a website called funerals.scot, but it is as relevant to people all across the UK really. And at funerals.scot, it's self-help advice that just sets out what your options are, whether you're arranging a funeral now or planning one in advance, what benefits are available to you, how you can make some savings, and maybe how to get a bit of emotional support if you need to draw on that.
Well, John, that sounds like a really useful resource. Thank you so much for joining us. That's John Halliday from Caledonia Funeral Aid. Thank you very much. Now,